many of you can read. So it's a study of rhetoric and political speeches given during wartime. For my capstone, which I've been working on for about a year now, I read a book about rhetoric. I looked at 6 really famous political speeches given during wartime. I read 10 secondary sources for those speeches, and I planned this entire presentation, which is basically going to introduce you to what rhetoric is. In fact, I just used rhetoric to convince you that you use rhetoric. It's a little confusing, but stay with me. I didn't just study rhetoric, though. I studied rhetoric and political speeches given during wartime. There is a trend of rhetoric in these speeches. Every speaker wants to unify his or her audience and inspire them to act and convince them that the speaker's will is right. So, we've gone over the 3 forms of persuasion. What are they again? Okay, there are a lot of them. We've gone over the 3 forms of persuasion, and now we move on to rhetorical tropes. Tropes are specific patterns of language, like alliteration or rhyming. The modes of persuasion may be what you're saying, but you're going to use rhetorical tropes to say that. It's where you're putting the words that will ultimately make up your message. Tropes are often used because they're pleasing to hear and because they provide an easy and convenient way of organizing your point. They also make sure that your audience will remember what you're saying by building a rhythm or a pattern. So, let's look at an example. But it's more than that, though. Using repetition like this, making a pattern, it's the equivalent of rocking a baby to sleep. We like to hear it. It's soothing. It makes us more engaged and more interested when we sense a pattern. This one has the distinction of being one I mean. Does anyone speak fluent Latin out there? You can get 2 Hershey kisses. That's okay. Because hopefully, I didn't either, so hopefully it's a crude translation to appealing to the authority of God. All of the orators I studied were leaders of predominantly Christian and therefore God-believing countries. An appeal to God was an appeal to ethos, but because likening oneself to God in a speech is a surefire way of seeming like an arrogant jerk, they use these phrases instead. We shall shortly have a famous victory over the enemies of my God, of my kingdom, and of my people. Queen Elizabeth's armies aren't just her enemies or the enemies of England, they're the enemies of God. It's a heavy cross to bear, and it makes them all the more hated, where she is all the more loved. JFK, meanwhile, says, "Here on earth, God's work must truly be our own," which is about as noble and charitable as work can get. And then we have Bush. Freedom and fear, justice and cruelty have always been at war, and we know that God is not neutral between them. He's employing Elizabeth's technique of making God pick sides. Not only that, but he puts, and understandably so, freedom and fear on one side, and implies that God would agree with this one. With these phrases, a belief in God is now a belief in the country, and even in the orator. It's why they're used. All right, for bonus points, what other trope is Queen Elizabeth using here? Yes, Adam.
Tricolor.
Yes. Okay, come find you later. I really don't want to embarrass myself. And finally, I hope your biggest takeaway is that you're a part of the rhetorical triangle. You're the audience. And with technology, we talked about it, it's not just limited to the room you're in anymore. Anytime you watch a video of a speech, hear it covered on NPR, listen to it on The Daily Show, you've become a point in the triangle. You are all considered now when speechwriters worry about offending you in a certain paragraph. The least you can do is consider them back. Thank you.